Many years ago, I was in the U.S. Navy and suddenly got orders to ship out. And we weren't told initially where we were going. We just told to get the ship ready for sail. So we got underway, and after we got underway, came out, we were headed for Cuba. Now, a lot of you won't remember this, but some of you will. There was a time when America discovered that Russia had been planning nuclear, well, I'm not sure if it was nuclear, but ballistic missiles in Cuba. They were building missiles there to be housed on Cuba. And that was unacceptable. The president at the time was John F. Kennedy. And Kennedy ordered a blockade of the ships delivering the parts, the missile parts. I was in the Navy, and I was part of the blockade, part of the ships that went over there. There were a large number of ships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, all kinds of ships. We got over there and basically did the blockade. And I forget how long we were there, but came back many years later after Russia loosened up and a lot of things started coming out, and we actually had access to a lot of Russian documents, and they were a little freer with their information. We learned for the first time how close we'd come to nuclear war. Khrushchev was a nut. He was a little peasant with a peasant mind. If he was a chess player, he would have been able to think no more than 2 moves in advance, if that. And he really had no concept of what his actions would do in the event of a nuclear war. None at all. He was just a small-minded man. And he was talked out of it, fortunately, but we were close. I mean, he was for it. His hand was proverbially on the button. And anyway, all that to say this. There has never been a time in American history besides that time when we are closer to a nuclear conflict than now. There's so much tension out there. China, Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, Iran, Israel. All of these have potential threats embedded, nuclear threats. The threat to destroy Israel, for example, is not an idle threat. They would, if they could, destroy every Jew on the planet. Iran would, and those that follow Iran. But they're unable to beat Israel in a conventional war. They're no match. They don't have the weapons to match. They don't have the skill set. And frankly, they don't have the fighting spirit. Israel is quite a nation in terms of being a warrior nation. They're very close to what America is, and in many ways outdo America in terms of their spirit. Whereas we have some special forces that, pretty gung-ho and so forth. Just about every soldier in Israel has got that same spirit, that same mindset. So why do you think Iran wants nuclear weapons? Well, pretty clear. They can't beat them otherwise. The only way they can beat Israel is if they gather enough nations to combine with them and attack Israel. That's the only way they can do it. By themselves, they know they can't do it. They know they're no match. So the nuclear weapon is one of the avenues that they will take if they have to. I don't think it's at the top of their list, but if they have to, and the reason it's not at the top of their list is they really want Israel. They want to own it. They want to possess it. They don't want to have a nuclear bomb there where they're not going to be able to live there and not going to be able to use it. So that's kind of it's not a priority weapon for them in terms of using that first. But it is a leverage. It is a weapon they can use for leverage. So, but the day we do nuclear war, which I think one day is going to happen, here you've got one of the largest, one of the three major powers who actually threatened the use of nuclear weapons. Putin did. Would he do it? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Do you want to flip the proverbial coin and find out? A nuclear attack, obviously would be a chaotic event for the world. The economy would just tank. We would have no economy. Food shortages would be everywhere. The supply chains would diminish, in some cases be destroyed. That's happening already in some countries, just because of the COVID thing and because of wars. There's just famine in some countries. Somalia's in terrible, terrible condition. And other places, Ethiopia. A lot of places are just chaos and just death everywhere. The world is bursting at the seams, and today, for the first time, we have the potential of wiping out millions of people in minutes. Now, that hasn't happened since I was in the Navy back in the 60s. And I think back then it would not have been as severe as it will be today. Today, it would be just so bad because there's so many more nuclear weapons and they're so much more powerful. They would do so much devastation you can't even imagine. Imagine one nuclear bomb in the middle of New York or Chicago or some major city, the chaos that would reign economically, psychologically, just beyond the death itself. Jesus talked about those times in Luke 21, and that's the focus of our lesson today. It's about the coming of the end. If you're following in a Bible, if you turn to Proverbs 1, I'm going to read 22 to 33. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn you at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you. I will make known my words unto you, because I've called. You refused. I stretched out my hand, and no man regarded. But you set at naught all my counsel, and you would have none of my reproof. I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your fear comes. When your fear comes as desolation, and your destruction comes as a whirlwind. When distress and anguish comes upon you, then shall they call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me early, but they shall not find me. For that they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel. They despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own devices. For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. But whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil. Again, that's found in the book of Proverbs, and verses 22 to 33. Have you ever met somebody that you couldn't tell anything to, a know-it-all? Let me tell you, there are so many out there today. So many. There's a saying, some drink from the fountain of knowledge, some only gargle. I don't know about you, but I've seen enough fools in my day. I've seen enough foolish people. I really don't care to see any more. But you can't turn on the news today without seeing it. Seeing the idiots, seeing the fools, the talking heads who really have no wisdom, none at all. So these verses are talking about wisdom here, talking about the knowledge of God and the wisdom of God, about knowing God. Wisdom. The Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. We see in the world today, particularly in America, we see fools despising wisdom and instruction. You can't tell them anything. You can't tell them. And they don't turn when there's reproof. They don't turn at all. If there's no turning away from your sins, if there's no turning at the reproof of God, when bad things happen, look at our nation, look at all the things around us that are happening that's bad. God's trying to get our attention. And the fools are shrugging and, well, that's just happenstance. Just one of those things, it's just life. And they're fools. God is trying to warn us. He's saying, hey, turn to me, turn to me. And they've refused. God's made known his words. I mean, you can turn the television on or look on YouTube or wherever, and you can see people talking about God, like this video. There are tens of thousands of videos like this, talking about God, giving warnings, and for the most part, people have rejected those warnings. We see it in our news. We see how people live. They despise God. They despise goodness. They love evil. They love rioting. They love all the bad things. And they've rejected the counsel of God. And, how long is that going to go on? And as God warned, there's going to come a day. And these people are going to call on God. And he's not going to answer. They're not going to find him. Why? They rejected God. They rejected his words, his counsel, his everything. They rejected everything about him. And now, day late and a dollar short. America's been warned. Books, magazines, you name it. It's out there. America's been counseled by God. Israel had the same kind of a history. America's been blessed of God, and we really have been. We've been a garden, sort of a Garden of Eden. We've been a blessing to the world. God has used us to bless this world so many ways. Think of the tons of missionaries we've sent out. Think of the charity we've done. America's the most charitable nation on the planet. We've done all this, and we have just benefited the world in so many ways. I'm going to turn this phone off because it keeps dinging on me. Here's some warnings that was given to Israel by Moses, way back. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day. And a curse if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside out of the way which I command you this day, to go after other gods, which you've not known. He says, turn away from these false gods. When they came out of Egypt, Egypt was a land where it was filled with false gods. And they had troubles, if you recall. There were troubles out there in the desert with these false gods, with people worshiping these false gods. And God is saying, look, turn away from these. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. God is a jealous God. Then that was in Deuteronomy 11, 26 and 28. And then Deuteronomy 14, 1 and 2. You are the children of the Lord your God. You should not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. And the Lord has chosen you to be a peculiar people unto himself, above all nations that are upon the earth. God significantly, deliberately, openly blessed Israel, called them his people, called them favored of God. And but he put in front of them a blessing and a curse. America has before it the same thing, blessing and a curse. And right now we're benefiting from the curses. We still have blessings of God, but boy, let me tell you, we are getting the curses. We're look, it's not that God's up there saying, oh, you're doing wrong, I'm going to send these lightning bolts down at you. It doesn't work quite that way. God has set up a system, and he's set up many laws. And these are spiritual laws. It's a reaping and sowing kind of system that God has set up. If you do bad things are going to follow. You will reap what you sow. And if you do enough bad, then let me tell you, bad things are going to follow. And that's what we're seeing today. America's turned away from God as a nation, and we are reaping what we've sown. It's not that God's up there trying to punish us. It is the laws of God are fixed, and we're breaking those laws. Look at it like this. If you get up on a tall building and you jump off, whose fault is it when you die? Yours or God's? God made the laws of gravity. God would not prefer you to do that. But if you do it, his law will have an impact, pun intended. So you think about that in terms of America and where it's gone. The laws of God are working, and we're seeing calamity everywhere. We're seeing disasters. We're seeing floods. We're seeing and they're going to keep going. They're going to keep mounting. So anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. Solomon, when he dedicated the altar, he built, dedicated the altar, but he built a house for God. If you are familiar with the story, basically he had, David had wanted to build God a house, and God had said, no, you're a bloody man. You've killed too many people. Let your son do it. And so in 1 Kings 8:22, as Solomon stood before the altar of God in the presence of all the congregation of Israel, he spread his hands toward heaven. And I'm not going to read all of it to you, but he says in part this: when thy people Israel be smitten down before the enemy, because they have sinned against thee, and shall turn again to thee, and confess thy name, and pray, and make supplication unto thee in this house, then hear thou in heaven, and forgive the sin of thy people Israel, and bring them again into the land which thou gavest unto their fathers. When heaven is shut up, and there's no rain because they've sinned against you, if they pray toward this place and confess thy name and turn away from their sin when you've afflicted them, hear from heaven, forgive the sin of thy servants and of thy people Israel, that thou teach them the good way wherein they should walk, and give rain unto thy land, which thou hast given to thy people for an inheritance. If there be in the land famine, if there be pestilence, blasting, mildew, locust, or if there be caterpillar, if their enemy besiege them in the land of their cities, whatsoever plague, whatsoever sickness there be, what prayer supplication soever be made by any man or by all thy people Israel, which shall know every man the plague of his own heart, and spread forth his hand toward this house, then hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and forgive, and do and give to every man according to his ways, whose heart thou knowest. For thou, even thou only, knowest the hearts of all the children of men, that they may fear thee all the days that they live in the land which thou gavest unto our fathers. That's found in 1 Kings chapter 8, 33 to 40. Solomon was clearly giving a warning Israel of the consequences of their refusal to hear God, to obey God. And after this, after Solomon died, Israel became divided. So it was split into two kingdoms, Israel and Benjamin, Judah, the rest of the tribes known as Israel. So is America immune? Well, of course not. As I've already said, we're not immune. God's made these laws. We will reap what we sow. And if we disobey God and reject God and refuse to hear God, we're going to pay a price. There's just no question about that. You can't, 1 and 1 is 2. It's going to happen. Thessalonians talks about something that's coming. Talks about what's known in the Bible as the rapture. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the rapture, but that's coming. But before that happens, there's going to be other things that happen. And one of those is what I've called the beginning of the end. Basically, it is found in Luke 21, beginning of verse 10. Then said he unto them, Jesus is talking, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and great earthquakes shall be in divers, that's a variety of places, and famines, and pestilences, that's diseases, viruses, plagues, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. So he's instructing his disciples about what the end is going to look like. And then continuing down to verse 20, beginning verse 20, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed or encircled with armies, plural, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. That's the desolation of Jerusalem. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let them which are in the middle of it depart out. Let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive unto all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars and upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's heart failing them for fear. In other words, there's going to be a lot of heart attacks. And for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and draw up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of looking forward to the rapture part of it. I don't want to go through that part. I don't want to go through this where there's great distress in the land and just all kinds of bad things are happening. I really don't. It's going to be, once that happens, believe me, these are really bad times. Bad times. It's going to be bad times on a natural scale. There's going to be earthquakes, going to be just a lot of things. I want to be here. 1 Thessalonians. I told you earlier about the rapture. That's where I want to be. I don't know about you, but I want to be where we're taken out of it. We're taken away from it. 1 Thessalonians 4:13-17, we read as follows. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep. That means those who are dead. That you may not grieve as others do, who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who've fallen asleep. In other words, when he returns, those who've died already, God's bringing with him. They're in heaven. He's bringing them back with him. They're spirits. They are spiritual beings. Will bring with him those who've fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who've fallen asleep. In other words, we're not going to go up first. They are. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. Look, I don't know about you, but I know there's bad times coming. I don't want to be a part of those bad times. I want to be out of here. Those of you who don't believe in the rapture, you don't think that's going to happen, I suggest you study a little bit more about what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah and what happened in the days of Noah. Those are times referenced by Jesus. And I don't have time to go into that now. But God made a way of escape for his chosen, for his people. Now, at the time of Noah, there was only 8 that escaped because the whole DNA of mankind was corrupted. The whole DNA, except for Noah. Isn't that amazing? But God took his people out of harm's way. When Sodom and Gomorrah came, God took his people out of the way. Think about that. God's going to take us out of the way when these bad times come. The question is are you one of his people? Are you one of the ones that's going to escape? I don't know the answer to that. You know, you should know. You may not care, at least right now, but I guarantee you'll care one day. Because if what I'm saying is true, oh man, you're going to look at these days and you're going to say, wow, oh my. But it's going to be too late. Too late. You're there for the duration. And that duration is however long you survive. Now, you'll still be able to turn to God, but you're going to have to go through that. Or you're going to have to die in it, one of the two. I don't know. Think about that. Well, that's the lesson. Tried to keep it as short as possible, but I wanted to just get across the idea that we're living in perilous times. The end is coming. It is around the corner. Personally, I think it's very, very close. I don't make any predictions as to when, but I suggest that we have maybe months, few years maybe at best. Now, God, of course, is the one that makes the final decision on all that, not me, not you. So we'll see. Don't be one of those left behind. Be one of those that's taken up out of the way, out of harm's way. Thanks for listening.